Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, I should say, May 7th. Hope everybody's having a great day so far. It has been a wild day in sports. Of course, the big story being George Pickens traded from the Pittsburgh Steelers to the Dallas Cowboys. We'll break that story down. We'll talk about the NBA action from last night. For the first time in NBA history, all road playoff teams have taken game one, home court disadvantage, you might call it, in round two of the NBA playoffs. We'll talk about the overtime game and the comeback effort in the NHL, as well as just some updates from around the NFL as we get to that at the end. But before we get into George Pickens, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, May 7th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into everything that you need to know about one George Pickens moving to the Cowboys in a blockbuster trade. Of course, we're going to start off from the Cowboys side before we get into George Pickens and the Steelers situation. George Pickens, of course, a very interesting wide receiver. He is someone that is undoubtedly incredibly talented at the wide receiver position. One of, if not the best hands in all of the NFL, the best contested catch receiver for my money in the entire NFL. But also, he is a guy that it helps him on the field, I'm sure, but it also hurts him, whereas he has a big personality, right? He's someone that clearly got the Steelers rubbed the wrong way. His relationship with the Steelers front office, Coach Mike Tomlin, wasn't really the best, and I know the Steelers have the ability to deal with personalities. They dealt with Antonio Brown. They kind of controlled him as best as anybody really could. They've dealt with Le'Veon Bell, who held out. They've dealt with Big Ben, who had a big personality of his own, going on and blaming all his teammates and stuff. There's a lot of things that the Steelers have dealt with, but for whatever reason, George Pickens, for his supreme talent, just was too much for the Steelers to handle, and they were rubbed the wrong way by it. So once they went out and they traded for DK Metcalf, the Steelers did, the writing, at least for me, and for what I've seen around the internet as well, a lot of people saying the writing was on the wall there. George Pickens and DK Metcalf are the same player. Obviously, they have a couple different strengths and weaknesses. George Pickens is probably the best contested ball receiver in the NFL. DK Metcalf is more of a straight line speed guy, but still a big physical deep threat receiver. And that's what you had at both wide receiver positions, which could have been fun. But also, it seemed like the relationship had soured with George Pickens. The Cowboys, on the other hand, one of their biggest weaknesses, wide receiver. They needed to get a wide receiver bad to pair next to CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb has had zero help last season. In 2023, his numbers from 2023, where he had 1,700 yards, was an all-pro receiver. They dropped drastically when they didn't have a second threat that came from having a guy like Brandon Cooks there, even though Brandon Cooks not necessarily the biggest threat overall. He had 600 less yards, CeeDee Lamb did, that last year than he did 2 years ago, 45 less catches, and half as many touchdowns in the same period of time. That is something that the Cowboys desperately needed. They didn't have another second option on the offense, so it was just throw the ball up to CeeDee Lamb, see what he can do. Now that you have a guy in George Pickens that can be a true deep threat, a guy that can really take defenders away from CeeDee Lamb, that Cowboys offense is going to be dangerous. Pickens, of course, had a bit of a down season last year, at least when comparing it to what he had done in previous years. He goes for 900 yards on 59 catches, only 3 touchdowns. He had over 1,000 yards in the season prior, catching 63 balls, going for 1,140 yards, as well as 5 touchdowns. In his rookie season, we saw a very similar approach to what happened in 2024, 52 catches, 801 yards, and 4 touchdowns, but the Steelers' offense as a whole was just kind of down last year with the quarterbacks being switched. There are a lot of things that changed along the lines of George Pickens, but he now joins a Cowboys squad. The Cowboys, in order to get him, gave up a 2026 third-round pick and a 2027 fifth-round pick. The Cowboys got, of course, George Pickens, as well as a sixth-round pick in 2027. There's a lot of ways to look at this. Again, for the Steelers, their wide receiver room is a mess right now. It would have been nice for them to hold on to George Pickens, but at the end of the day, it just felt like that relationship had run its course and they needed to move off of him. Right now, wide receiver 2 for the Steelers, we're looking at Robert Woods to be wide receiver 2, and he doesn't have that ability anymore. Calvin Austin, who I think is a nice piece, not really a wide receiver 2, but there's lots of opportunities for them to go sign guys. You have guys out in the open market, veterans like Amari Cooper, veterans like Keenan Allen, guys like Gabe Davis, who just got cut today that we'll talk a little bit about later on in the show. There's a lot of options out there for the Steelers. Of course, it doesn't matter who you have if you don't have a quarterback. Mason Rudolph is not a guy that you go into the season seriously thinking that you're happy with, regardless of all the reports coming out of Pittsburgh, where they're saying, yes, we'd be but we'd be happy with Mason Rudolph as our starter. You're lying. We don't like liars here at the GSMC Down by Contact Sports podcast. Not a big fan of that. George Pickens going to the Cowboys is going to be huge, though. The big question, though, with the Steelers on the other side is what does this mean as far as a potential Aaron Rodgers signing, which this was always going to get roped in. Aaron Rodgers is, in my opinion, the Steelers quarterback. There is a lot of things we still don't know. He obviously still hasn't signed, but I think there's almost a 5% or less chance that he does not sign with the Steelers and instead retires. There's not really another real option out there for him. Aaron Rodgers has done throw-arounds with DK Metcalf. Nothing has come out about him doing throw-arounds with George Pickens, which makes me think the Steelers were communicating this with him. Of course, it's not like Aaron Rodgers is holding them hostage, but this is something that I'm sure the Steelers would have told him if they were seriously trying to court Aaron Rodgers into going over there. Overall, this is a very interesting trade. I don't think this trade gets made if George Pickens has the demeanor of your average NFL wide receiver. If George Pickens has your kind of attitude on the field as your average NFL wide receiver, but that's what makes George Pickens special. This isn't something to tear him down over. This isn't something that we need to say this isn't going to work in Dallas. He's someone that he cares about the game. He gets invested in it, and sometimes it just spills over a little bit too much. Because of that, he got run out of Pittsburgh, but his fit with Dak and CeeDee Lamb on the other side is going to be amazing to watch. That Cowboys offense is going to be very dangerous now. I've seen some people say the opposite, but George Pickens, like I said, one of the best contested catch receivers in the entire NFL. You get Dak Prescott, you give Dak Prescott that kind of weapon, he's going to throw it up to him. It's going to free up space for CeeDee Lamb. That is going to be a dangerous offense down in Dallas this season. I love this trade for the Cowboys. For the Steelers, it makes sense because, again, that relationship had soured. But it's not something that you love roster-wise unless they make another move that brings in a more wide receiver talent like a Keenan Allen or like an Amari Cooper, someone like that can step in and play that wide receiver 2 role next to DK Metcalf. I'd love to see what happens over there, but I also would love to hear your thoughts. What did you think about this trade? Huge news post-draft. This changes a lot of things in the NFL, power rankings in the NFC East, how the Steelers look at this season coming up, whether or not they're going to tank or not. Again, a big conversation over there in Pittsburgh, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think of this trade? We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to the NBA playoffs. The Pacers have pulled off the second miracle comeback of these playoffs. We'll talk about what happened there against the Cavs, as they have now taken a 2-0 series lead and continue the trend of home court equals a loss. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.